Hello YouTube and welcome back to another video. The NBA trade deadline was about 2.5 weeks ago, and today, after watching everyone play with their new teams for a few games and just seeing how everything folds out with the buyout market and what has happened since these trades, I wanted to make a video discussing the NBA trade deadline and going over who the winners and losers are. Okay, we're going to be just going in order of when the trades took place. We're going to be grading them, everything, giving overviews. So the first trade of the NBA trade deadline week, of course, was the Luka Doncic trade. It was the Saturday before the deadline, and it sent Luka Doncic, Maxi Kleber, Markieff Morris, and $55,000 to the Los Angeles Lakers. Anthony Davis, Max Christie, a Lakers 2029 first-round pick, and $55,000 to the Mavericks. And it sent Jalen Hood, a 2025 second-round pick, and another 2025 second-round pick to the Jazz. So at the time of this deal, obviously I did make a YouTube video, but my thoughts on it have changed a little bit. After seeing LeBron and Luka play a game together, play actually a few games together, I think that the Lakers did obviously win this trade. I was a little bit in between when the trade first happened, but I think that the Lakers are now my clear winner. The Mavericks, on the other hand, I did think that they did get an awful return for Luka, but Max Christie is playing very good, and he's under contract for 3 more years, so that's a big part of this deal. Then for the Jazz, I thought that they would keep Jalen Hood and try to take a flyer on him. They didn't. They just ended up releasing him, so it's whatever there. They do get 2 second-round picks this year in what has been called the most deep draft class in NBA history, so that is something to watch for sure. But honestly, at the time of the deal, so honestly, let's just start with this. The Lakers did obviously win this trade, but they did give up a lot. It's not a clear A+. I think if I have to regrade this trade, I'd give the Lakers an A-. The Mavericks, I think, get probably a D+. I mean, Max Christie has played great, but Anthony Davis, they said that they didn't even give him a physical. He ended up coming out and getting hurt in his first game with the team. And then the Jazz, I'm going to stick with about an A- to a B+ for them because they do still get 2 second-round picks. Okay, on to the next trade. The Spurs getting De'Aaron Fox. This was another big trade. I did make a video about it when it happened. But the Spurs acquired De'Aaron Fox and Jordan McLaughlin from Sacramento. The Bulls received Kevin Huerter, Zach Collins, Trey Jones, and a first-round pick this year. It's their own first-round pick that they are getting back. And the Kings received C.D. Sissoko, Zach LaVine, a Hornets 2025 first-round pick, a Spurs 2025 first-round pick, a Timberwolves first, a Bulls second, a Nuggets second, and a Kings second. So, obviously, the team that got the most assets is the Kings, but they aren't all great assets, honestly. First off, for San Antonio, they get De'Aaron Fox, Jordan McLaughlin. I don't even think he's played a game in San Antonio yet, but De'Aaron Fox is obviously the main guy of that trade. He's been hooping ever since he got to San Antonio. He's probably automatically their second-best player. Him and Wemby have looked great together. He almost single-handedly carried them to a W against the Hawks. He's looked really good, and I think I have to give the Spurs an A+ on their part. All they really gave up was Zach Collins, Trey Jones, a first-round pick that wasn't theirs, and C.D. Sissoko, and then another first-round pick that was not theirs, the Hornets first, and then they gave up a 2027 first. That was their own. So they didn't give up too much, and they got a guy that's under contract for a little bit longer. They're definitely probably going to get an extension with him. He's one of the best point guards in basketball. He's looked great post-trade. And I really think that San Antonio and Greg Popovich, whenever he gets back to the head coaching job, can bring out the best in him. He does look like a great fit next to Victor Wembanyama. For the Bulls, they didn't get much for Zach LaVine. That's honestly a bad trade for them. They traded away a guy that's been the face of their franchise for 9 years now, ever since they got him from Minnesota in the Jimmy Butler trade. And all they got back in return is Kevin Huerter, who's not been good since post-trade, Zach Collins, I don't know about what he's been doing, but he was pretty decent. And then Trey Jones, who's been pretty good post-trade. So they could take a good flyer on Trey Jones, especially if they lose Josh Giddey in the offseason. He may be a big part of this team. And then the 2025 first-round pick, they do get back. They did not originally own their first-round pick. It was to San Antonio from the DeMar DeRozan trade. They get it back, which is a big deal. I do have to give them just like a C plus, though, because they do get Trey Jones, who's looked great, but two bad role players and getting your own first-round pick back for the face of your franchise isn't great. For the Kings, they get C.D. Sissoko, who they did release already, Zach LaVine, a Hornets 2025 first-round pick that is top 14 protected, so the Kings won't probably end up getting it. The Spurs 2027 first-round pick, and 3 second-round picks. So, for the Kings, they do get rid of De'Aaron Fox, but I honestly think they may be a better overall team after this trade, because this cleared up some salary cap space. They were able to get Jonas Valanciunas, which we'll talk about later. But Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan together, again, it's not a bad pairing. They've been winning a bit post-trade, and I think that they have potential to be a 6 or 7 seed in the West this year. They just need to go on one more good winning streak, and Doug Christie's already proven that he can do that. I don't mind this trade for them, but I do think that they could have got more for Fox. I'll give them an A-. Next up, the Thunder and the Hornets swapped second-round picks. The Thunder received the Suns' 2029 second-round pick, and the Hornets received the Hornets received the Suns' 2029 second-round pick. The Thunder received the Nuggets' 2030 second-round pick. This isn't a big trade. We don't really have to go into detail. The Thunder just kicking all their second-round picks back one extra year. I'll just give both teams an A there. Next up, the 76ers traded Caleb Martin to the Mavericks. Caleb Martin, a power forward out of the University of Nevada, went undrafted in 2017, played alongside his brother Cody, then went to the Heat, played pretty well, went to Philly. He was off to a very slow start to the season, so the 76ers just decided to sell on him while they could get whatever they could. They traded him to Dallas for Quentin Grimes and a second-round pick this year. Like I said earlier, this is a very deep draft class, and honestly, I think Quentin Grimes is a better overall player than Caleb Martin is in the first place. Grimes is a great 3-and-D guy. He can get you a bucket when he needs to, but more importantly, he's a great on-ball defender. If his jump shot ever comes, he'd be great, but I think right now he's a higher-level offensive version of Matisse Thybulle, which is definitely not bad for Philadelphia. They could use guys like that can just guard the other team's best player night in and night out, while also getting you 8 to 10 points a game. And I think that they honestly got somebody that was better than Caleb Martin, and he's on a more team-friendly deal. Martin was set to make $10 million a year for the next 2 seasons after this one. From Dallas's point of view, they lost a little bit of depth in the front court at the power forward spot after trading away Kleba and everyone else in the Luka trade. They gave up Kleba and I don't even remember. But they did lose some depth. Anthony Davis wants to play the power forward. They didn't have a great backup for him. So now they get Caleb Martin. He's going to be the power forward or the small forward. PJ Washington will do whatever Caleb Martin doesn't do. For Dallas, it's like a B-. I honestly think Grimes would have fit better with this team, but Max Christie has played just as good in the same position. So I think they did do the right thing with this trade. I just think they could have got somebody better than Caleb Martin. A B- for them. For Philadelphia, it's a B+. If they're a rebuilding team the next year or two, this really makes sense for them. Next up, the Wizards and Bucks swapping Kyle Kuzma and Chris Middleton. The Bucks received Kyle Kuzma, Patrick Baldwin Jr., and a 2025 second-round pick, while the Wizards received Chris Middleton, A.J. Johnson, and a pick swap. For Milwaukee, Chris Middleton is a guy that was making $30 million a year, and he's been awful this season. He's having, career lows while he's been in Milwaukee in points per game, and he's also been very injury-prone the last year or two. So, honestly, trading him out for Kyle Kuzma is not a bad deal. Kuzma, like it was said a lot around the time of the trade, has been very hurt this year. He's been having a very bad down year. But honestly, I think the change of scenery, getting him into Milwaukee, another championship contender, getting him out of a crappy Washington team, it could bring out the best in Kyle Kuzma. Obviously, hasn't been amazing since the trade, but I do still have high hopes for him in Milwaukee. They already released Patrick Baldwin Jr. and then another second-round pick getting traded for this year's draft. It's a big deal. I give the Bucks an A+ on this one. This is a pretty decent deal. For the Wizards, Chris Middleton's not staying past this offseason. I think he's a free agent, but like I said, he's having an awful year. He might have to sign for the veterans minimum and try to go chase a ring next year. Or he can just be a mentor in some younger, smaller market team like the Thunder or the Wizards again. Maybe, I don't even know where he would go. They also get A.J. Johnson, who they played a lot post-trade. He is a former first-round pick this last summer, but he was very raw when they drafted him. I think playing in Washington, getting more opportunity will really help his development. And then a pick swap. I have to give them a B+. I think if they would have sold Kyle Kuzma at his highest peak, they could have got a lot more in this trade. Next up, the 76ers trading K.J. Martin to the Pistons. This is the worst trade the 76ers have done. They've made some awful trades this deadline. I really hate this one for them. They decided to trade 26-year-old, I think he's about 26 years old, power forward K.J. Martin, who's a freak athlete, got a lot of potential. They traded him to the Pistons, along with 2 second-round picks, for some money. They had to give up, and it wouldn't be that bad of a trade if it's like the Thunder giving up 2 second-round picks to get off a contract that they don't want. But the 76ers only had like 6 tradable picks going into or 6 total picks that they owned going into the deadline. And then 2 of their only like 3 tradable picks they have to give up to get rid of Kenyon Martin Jr. That's an awful deal. I gave the 76ers an F and the Pistons an A+, because you're buying high on KJ Martin, who they did end up releasing, but they get 2 second-round picks. It's not a bad deal for them. And I honestly think that the second-round picks are more valuable than KJ Martin was to Philadelphia anyway. Next up, the Celtics dumping Jaden Springer. The Rockets received point guard Jaden Springer and a 2030 second-round pick. The Celtics received a heavily protected second-round pick swap. For Boston, this is just to duck the luxury tax even more. Springer is a point guard who is a former first-round pick in 2022, I think, out of Tennessee. He was a great athlete, but had awful shooting consistency his first 2 or 3 years in the NBA with Boston and Philadelphia. And he has ultimately lost his job. I don't know if he'll be making a return to the NBA anytime soon, because he really didn't show anything in his time in the league. The Celtics did have to give up a 2030 second-round pick to get him off, but it is worth it, opening up a roster spot and dumping his salary. The Rockets, I gave a C- because they do have to eat his contract. It is higher than the minimum, so not great for them. The Celtics, I gave a B+, because they didn't just receive cash like Philadelphia. They did get a heavily protected second-round pick swap, which they could end up getting down the line. So they did get something. That's something Philadelphia did not do. Next up, the Pelicans dumping center Daniel Tice to Oklahoma City. The Thunder received Daniel Tice and a 2031 second-round pick from New Orleans in exchange for cash. For New Orleans, they haven't paid the luxury tax in their team's history. They decided to trade Daniel Tice so they can avoid doing it, and they received cash in return. Tice was not even a contributor in New Orleans. He's now over in Europe. The Thunder have released him post-trade. And the Thunder, for them, they just get another second-round pick. They have so many more picks than any team in basketball, first or second round, and they just get another one just in exchange for releasing a minimum salary contract. Great trade for them, B- for them, C for the Pelicans. If the Thunder would have kept Tice, it would have been probably lower because they don't need him, but a B- just because they did take on the salary, and they are going to be paying a lot of guys, so this is just kind of a precautionary B-, because yes, it's a good trade for now, but this may signal that Presti may make a lot more deals like this in the future, which is not a good thing for Oklahoma City. Next up, the Kings trade for Jonas Valanciunas. The Kings received center Jonas Valanciunas. The Wizards received C.D. Sissoko, Nuggets 2028 second-round pick, and the Kings 2029 second round pick. And the Wizards have waived CD Sissoko since the trade. So for the Kings, they're getting a really good veteran center who played with Domantas Sabonis on the Lithuanian national team. So good for them. They get the team back up. It makes a lot of sense to get Valanciunas. He's a good stretch five who gets a lot of rebounds. He's a good value guy, only making about $10 million a year. When going into free agency, it was said that he might make $20 million or more. So the Wizards stole him in the free agent market. No one knew why they signed him, but they're getting some okay value for him. Not great, not bad, but he wasn't in their long-term plans anyway. So it does make sense getting 2 second-round picks in return for him. For Sacramento, I give him an A. For Washington, I give him a C- because if they didn't sign him in the first place, they wouldn't have to do anything. But they do get the 2 second-round picks, so not awful. The Warriors trade for Jimmy Butler. So the Warriors received small forward Jimmy Butler. The Heat received Andrew Wiggins, PJ Tucker, Kyle Anderson, and a Warriors 2025 first-round pick. The Pistons received Josh Richardson, Lindy Waters, and Dennis Schroeder. And the Jazz received a 2031 second-round pick. This trade has changed a little bit since it was official, so I'm unsure if this is the current 100% finalized trade. But just looking at it like this, the Warriors getting Jimmy Butler, him and Steph have played pretty great together. It's just the injury concerns with their age. So I have to give the Warriors a C+, because it's not a bad fit. It's just they're paying him $50 million a year for the next 3 seasons. And he's like 35 years old already. And he's not a great basketball player at this point in his career. So I don't get it with the money standpoint. The Heat get Andrew Wiggins and Kyle Anderson and a first that's top 10 protected for this season. So the Heat are likely to get that Warriors pick this year. Wiggins has played pretty good and Kyle Anderson the same, but not a needle-moving deal for them. They do only get 1 first-round pick for Jimmy Butler, but he didn't want to be there anyway, so he had no leverage. The Pistons get Josh Richardson, Lindy Waters, and a second-round pick, as well as Dennis Schroeder. Schroeder, I think he could be a long-term fit in Detroit if he wants to stay in a smaller market because he's a good veteran leader. I think he could be a great 6-man behind Cade Cunningham. So I like that. Lindy Waters is a great shooter, so that makes sense. And then the second-round pick, I give them an A-. Next up, the Knicks swap Sims and DeLon Wright. It was just a 1-for-1 trade. No cash, no second-round picks, no anything. The Knicks received point guard DeLon Wright. The Bucks received center Jericho Sims. I do think DeLon Wright is the more valuable asset in this because Sims is going into free agency at the end of the season. And DeLon Wright is the good veteran guy who's made it to the NBA Finals. Or no, he was traded before the Finals. But he's been on great teams before. He's a good defender at the point guard spot. And I think that he could be a good player for most NBA teams. The Knicks get him for basically nothing. And he can be a good third-string point guard behind Campaign and Brunson to end out the season. And then for the Bucks, Jericho Sims, not great, but they did need a little bit extra center depth. So they do get a really good athlete who can also provide a little bit of rebounding. He just really needs to develop offensively. B- for the Bucks, B for the Knicks. Next up, this was kind of a shock when it happened, but the Raptors traded for Brandon Ingram. The Raptors received small forward Brandon Ingram. The Pelicans received shooting guard Bruce Brown Jr., center Kelly Olynyk, a 2026 first-round pick, and a 2026 second-round pick. So first off, for the Raptors, I have to give them an A-. Brandon Ingram has shown a lot of potential. He was an all-star just a few seasons ago, but he's had a lot of injury concerns. He's had inconsistencies in his game. He's not the perfect player at all. He's a really good guy. He's just not a guy that can be a number 1 on a championship team. So Toronto making deals for the future right now. They did re-sign him for, I think, 2 extra years on his contract. And then for the Pelicans, I have to give him a C-. Ingram is still pretty young. I think if they could have traded him at his peak, because there was rumors last year that they could have got like a first-round pick and a good player for him. Now they just get a bad first-round pick and some bad role players on bad contracts. They get Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk. Neither of them are in New Orleans' future plans, and then a 2026 first-round pick. Not a great trade for them. Next up, that trade did get rescinded. Lakers for Mark Williams. That trade did not actually end up happening. The Raptors trading for P.J. Tucker. The Raptors received power forward P.J. Tucker and a second-round pick. The Heat received Davion Mitchell. I really like this trade for Miami. I had to give them an A+ just because Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, the two leaders in Miami, they have been great ever since they have been leading in Miami at developing young guys. Just look at like Haywood Highsmith, Tyler Johnson, Bam Adebayo's got good development while he's been there. Tyler Hero even. They've just developed guys the right way. Drew Smith, like they've had a lot of success stories. Caleb Martin even. If you just look it up, they've had so many good young success stories. And they get Davion Mitchell, who's kind of a guy who the NBA has turned his back on. He's started every game post-deadline for the Heat. He is a very young point guard out of Baylor. He won the national championship with Baylor, then entered the NBA draft, was picked in the lottery by the Kings in 2021. So this is his final year of his rookie deal. I think that the Heat could keep him on like a minimum deal and develop him into like a DeLon Wright type guy, a guy that we talked about earlier. He's just got a lot of potential. The Heat are the type of team that can help him out, and he has been their starting point guard post-deadline. For the Raptors, they just get P.J. Tucker in cash and a second-round pick. Just take on a bad salary, a guy that's never going to play for them. That's a D. The Spurs trading for Patrick Baldwin Jr., who they did release. They got PBJ and cash. The Bucks got a trade exception, C- for both teams. No point in doing it even. The Bucks could just release Baldwin themselves. I don't think that they're very close to the luxury tax. If it was a tax-saving deal, then I do have to change my grade to a B for the Bucks because they did save money. Next up, the Hornets getting Jusuf Nurkic. The Hornets received Jusuf Nurkic and a 2026 first-round pick. The Suns received Cody Martin, Vasilij Micic, and a 2026 second-round pick. So for the Hornets, they're getting Nurkic, not a guy that's going to be in their long-term plans, but he is going to stick the rest of the season out there. I think he has 2 years left on his deal. He's not a needle mover for Charlotte, obviously, but he is kind of a stopgap center while they wait for Mark Williams to come back. Not bad, just a good veteran who's on a very bad season. And then they do get the 2026 first-round pick for taking on his salary, which is a big deal for a rebuilding team like Charlotte, but they haven't been able to draft well. But it is the Suns' first-round pick, I believe, so maybe it'll be in the top of the lottery. I have to give them an A-. Next up for the Suns, they get shooting guard Cody Martin, point guard Vasilij Micic, and a 2026 second-round pick. Not an awful trade to get off of Nurkic's contract, but if they didn't have to give up the first, it would have been better. The second's not bad value if it's Charlotte's, but Cody Martin could be something. I think I like his ability to get to the basket. He just really needs to develop a little bit offensively. He could be decent, but as of right now, he's not a needle mover in this trade, and Vasilij Micic is likely on an expiring deal if Phoenix declines his team option this summer, in which case he's likely to return back overseas. He was a solid point guard for Charlotte at the end of last season after they acquired him from Oklahoma City, but ever since he's been on a downward spiral. I think that Phoenix could get a lot out of him as a second or third string point guard, though. Next up, the Cavaliers trading for DeAndre Hunter. The Cavaliers received small forward DeAndre Hunter, while the Hawks received power forward Georges Niang, shooting guard Karis LeVert, 3 second-round picks, and 2 first-round pick swaps. First up for Cleveland, this is a B-. A lot of guys after this trade, a lot of guys came out after this trade and said that they didn't want to lose Niang and LeVert because they're a championship-level team and they had great chemistry together. Why trade away two guys that were in the rotation? They also had to give up 2 first-round pick swaps and 3 second-round picks. That's a lot of draft capital for DeAndre Hunter. I don't love this trade for Cleveland, but it's not horrible. Hunter has been pretty decent. He's been playing their starting small forward, but I think that they did overpay a little bit for him. Next up for the Hawks, you have to give them an A++, basically, because Post-trade, Niang and Levert have been going insane. I think they both had like 3 20-point games. And then they also got a bunch of draft capital. This is a great trade for them. Niang and Levert aren't long-term pieces, but if they could re-sign them in the offseason, they could definitely trade them for something after how promising they've been this season. The draft capital is also pretty good. The Wizards and Sixers swapped Butler and Jackson. The Wizards received Reggie Jackson, who has since been released, and a 2026 first-round pick. And the 76ers received Jared Butler and 4 second-round picks. The 76ers did release Pete Nance to finalize this trade. So for Washington, they get a first-round pick for nothing, basically, because they just had to release a minimum salary deal, and they gave up a two-way guy who's not in their future plans. And they had to give up 4 second-round picks. So they're just swapping, basically, a first for 4 second-round picks. I think if I'm Washington, I'd rather have the first. This is just another bad trade done by Daryl Morey and Philadelphia. Doesn't make sense. The Sixers get a D-, the Wizards get an A. Next up, the Clippers trade for Bogdan Bogdanovic. The Clippers received Bogdan Bogdanovic and 3 second-round picks, while the Hawks received Bones Highland and Terrence Mann. Originally, I thought that this was a great trade for Atlanta because I thought that they were going to keep Bones Highland, but they did end up releasing him. So they really just got Terrence Mann and dead salary. Mann has been great in his past few years of his career as a 3-and-D small forward. But this year he has been struggling post-trade. He hasn't been great in Atlanta, but it is just a small sample size of like 2 or 3 games. For the Clippers, they do get 3 second-round picks as well as Bogdan Bogdanovic. Bogdanovic has been struggling even since the trade, but the 3 second-round picks is a great big deal for the Clippers, a team that doesn't have much draft capital after trades like the Paul George deal and the James Harden deal. So this is a really big deal for them, especially also getting a good rotational guy for the playoffs. Next up, the Rockets trading for Cody Zeller. The Rockets received Cody Zeller and a second-round pick. The Hawks received the draft rights to 2017 second-round pick center Alpha Kaba. For the Hawks, this is to keep them out of luxury tax concerns. I give them a B because Zeller hasn't even played any game yet for them this season. I don't even know why he's on the roster. And then for the Rockets, they haven't released Zeller yet, but they do get a second-round pick, so I have to give them an A. Next up, the Pistons trading for Dennis Schroeder. The Jazz received KJ Martin, Josh Richardson, and a second-round pick. The Pistons received Dennis Schroeder. The Pistons, like I said earlier, this has kind of been tied into the bigger trade, but the Pistons have to get an A. The Jazz could have kept KJ Martin. Actually, I think they did. Yeah, they kept KJ Martin. They just released Josh Richardson, and they get a second-round pick. Not an awful trade for Utah and Danny Ainge. I give him a C+ because Martin still has potential, and then they do get a second-round pick. But Schroeder is, I think, a more valuable guy. Next up, our last 3 trades. The Bucks trading for Kevin Porter Jr. The Milwaukee Bucks in a 1-for-1 deal received Kevin Porter Jr. for Marjon Beauchamp. This is really a deal I don't understand from LA's point of view because the Clippers have been a decent team this year, and they have made win-now moves like the Bogdan Bogdanovic one earlier, but now they're trading away a guy who is on a minimum salary deal, Kevin Porter Jr. He was suspended from the NBA all of last season, but the year before that, he was great. He was having triple-doubles a few times. He was getting points, rebounds, good defender. He's a good point guard, and they traded him away for Marjon Beauchamp. I don't understand this, but for Milwaukee, Porter Jr. can come in and be a good reserve point guard after they trade away DeLon Wright. I give him an A+. And then for the Clippers, a D for getting Marjon Beauchamp because he's been awful to start his NBA career. Looking like one of the worst first-round picks made by the Bucks in recent history. Next up, the Wizards trading for Marcus Smart. The Wizards received Marcus Smart from the Grizzlies, Colby Jones from Sacramento, Alex Lynn from Sacramento, who has been released, a 2026 first-round pick from Memphis, and then the Kings received Jake LaRavia from Memphis, And the Grizzlies received Marvin Bagley from Washington, Johnny Davis from Washington, a 2028 second-round pick, and another second-round pick down the line. First up for Washington, Smart has stayed on their roster. I did think that they would buy him out, but he has stayed on the roster for now. He's nothing really to their team or to their long-term plans. They got Colby Jones from Sacramento. Okay shooting guard, but not much potential. He's also not that big of a deal in this trade. Alex Lynn got released. And then they get a 2025 first-round pick from Memphis just for giving up some guys that they don't want anyway. So this is a decent deal for them. Next up for the Kings, they get Jake LaRavia from Memphis for Colby Jones and Alex Lynn. So this is a very good deal for them. Jake LaRavia has looked pretty good for Memphis this year. He's averaging like 10 points a game off the bench, and he's only like 26 years old. I think that this is a good flyer that the Kings are taking on, especially since they just need some guys that can contribute with a thin rotation following a lot of trades that they've made. I give them a B-, and I give Washington a B- for getting that first-round pick. And then here for the Grizzlies, they get Marvin Bagley, who's okay. He can be a good contributor down low, even though they do have a lot of bigs. Johnny Davis, a guy that was a former top 10 pick that Washington already wrote off after 2 or 3 seasons. He's not going to do anything in Memphis, but I think that they could maybe trade him in the offseason if they pick up his team option and get a second-round pick or 2 from a young team. And then they get some second-round pick capital. I give them a C because I think Smart was more valuable than what they did end up getting, and they also had to give up a first-round pick and Jake LaRavia. So, not a good deal for them. Lastly here, the Pacers receive cash, and the Raptors receive James Wiseman. This is just a C for the Raptors and an A- for the Pacers. The Raptors have released James Wiseman, who is out for the season with a torn Achilles. So not a big deal for them, and the Pacers get cash in return, also not having to take on his salary by releasing him. And then just since the deadline happened, we're just going to grade a few of these signings. 76ers signed Chuma Okeke to a 10-day deal. That's like a B-. Decent taking a flyer on him. He did look great in preseason for the Knicks. Everyone thought he would take their last roster spot. They did end up keeping him. No, they didn't end up keeping him, the Knicks. They ended up releasing him, so not a big deal there. The 76ers signed Lonnie Walker to a 2-year deal. That's a bigger deal. It's worth $3 million. He's been pretty good in Europe. And then the Hornets signing Elfrid Payton to a 10-day deal. He hasn't been great in Charlotte, but he was great at New Orleans at the start of the year, and he's a good mentor. Thank you guys for watching. Comment down below what you think about this trade deadline, what I got wrong, what I got right. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.